can be frustrating sometimes when someone doesn't understand you. I don't know if you've ever felt like that before. I spent a week in Mexico, and language barriers can do that to you. If you try to communicate to someone, they don't understand what you're trying to say. But I wonder if you've ever felt this when you've wondered if someone doesn't understand what you're going through. Maybe you've felt that before. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of man flu? Let me tell you what man flu is, okay? I don't think it's real, but here's the definition of man flu. It's a phrase that refers to the idea that men, when they have a common cold, experience and self-report symptoms of greater severity akin to those experienced during the flu. Someone said it's real? It might be real. I'm not sure. But here's the idea. If you don't understand that definition, here's what it means. Us men, when we get sick, we act like we're dying when we're not. That's really what that translates to. Now, I tell you that because my wife thinks that I'm guilty of man flu, okay? So what this looks like is whenever I get sick, she thinks that I'm embellishing all the symptoms and that I'm not really as sick as what I claim to be. Now, in my defense, I feel like that when I do get sick, I really come down like really bad. I get really sick. I don't want to move. I don't want to talk, all those type of things. But she doesn't see that. She just thinks, oh, come on. You need to get your life together. You need to get this together. She doesn't understand what I'm going through. Now, what about physical pain? I wonder if you've ever been hurt before where people just don't get how hurt you are. Let me tell you a story. This summer, I got hurt really bad. Some of you may know this, but this is the first time I've told this story in front of anybody. And so let me walk this through with you. It was an ugly scene at my house one day because I just got back from vacation. In the middle of July, we went on vacation. We came back the very next day. I'm in my front yard. My kids, they're in the middle of t-ball season, and so we were practicing t-ball. And so when I practice t-ball with my kids, I got the tee, I put the ball on it, and they stand, and they're hitting this direction. I would sit on a stool right here, and I'd put the ball on there, and they would hit the ball, and then I'd stick another ball, they'd hit the ball, and it was just like this seamless thing. It was great. It was wonderful. Well, Dawson, who's a little bit younger and a little bit clumsy, okay? He gets up to bat, and he decided he didn't really want to play baseball that night. He wanted to go play with the neighbor across the street. And I said, Dawson, no, listen, you got to hit 10 balls, and then you can go play, but we got to hit 10. So he's trying to do this really fast, okay? And he takes a swing, and he swings, and he misses, which is not an uncommon thing for him, okay? And so he swings, and he misses, and he goes all the way around, spins in a circle, and when he comes back, do you know what he decides to do? He lets go of the bat. And he lets go of the bat, and you want to know where that bat hit me? Right in my mouth. A metal bat, okay, aluminum bat, hits me right in my mouth. It busted up my lip. It chipped my tooth, okay? Instantly, I fall to the ground. My face is in the grass, okay? Dawson starts crying because he's scared, like he just killed his dad or something, okay? My wife, who is across the street talking to the neighbors, hears him crying, looks over, sees me face down in the grass, wondering if I have just died, right? So she comes over and all this kind of stuff, and it was just a bloody mess and all this kind of stuff. Now, you want to see pictures? Okay. I want to warn you. I want to warn you that there's a little blood in here. So if that's not it's not a lot, but if that's something you're not interested in seeing, then look away, okay? So here's the first picture. I was aware enough to take a selfie after this happened. So you can see my lip is, but do you see my tooth missing? My front tooth, he chipped my front tooth off, okay? Okay, go to the next one. This is after stitches. I'm much more happy, okay? My tooth is fixed. The dentist did a great job, okay? Looks better than the first one, all right? And so that's, okay, put that off there. I don't want to see that anymore, all right? But here's the deal with all this. The actual injury wasn't that bad. I mean, did it hurt? Yeah, like I got hit with a bat, okay? But it really wasn't that bad. What was bad were the 7 to 10 days after that, when I had a busted up lip, I could barely brush my teeth, eating food was difficult. I mean, all those things. And in those moments, could my wife sympathize with me that I got hit with a bat? Surely. She took me to the med clinic, I got stitches, and she took care of me, all that kind of stuff. But afterwards, there was a little bit of like, okay, like it's over with, right? Like I'm not gonna baby you anymore. And that was really the worst part because I could barely eat food without it hurting and how painful it was. She didn't get my pain. Now, Here's why I tell you all of these things. Is because when people don't understand your pain, it's hard. Whether you're talking about like a physical pain or maybe even emotional pain, something like that. When people don't understand your pain, it's hard. And what I want to talk to you about tonight is that one of the ways that Jesus breaks trail, and we talked about this last week, how you break trail, you set a path for others to follow. One of the ways that Jesus breaks trail for us is that he understands our pain because he's gone through the same pain that we have gone through. What I have for you tonight is a little bit of a unique message because I really just have one main idea, and I have a couple things to say about it in a pretty lengthy text that I want to read to you. But what we're going to look at is something that's really important. So let me ask you this question. As we relate from like the things that we go through to our relationship with God, do you ever feel like God doesn't understand what you're going through? Or maybe that he doesn't care what you're going through? Now, I think I know how to answer that for you because I think that if you were to ask yourself this question, deep down inside of you, you truly believe that God does care about what you go through. Like, I would honestly bet that is true for you. That deep down, you do believe that God cares about what you go through. But sometimes in the midst of it, we lack the evidence or the feeling to really believe and feel that God does care what we're going through. And there's a difference between those two things. Maybe deep down you truly believe, but you don't always feel that. And so we're going to explore this a little bit. And I need you to wrestle with this tonight, this concept, this idea, this subject, because it's important how you handle this. It's important that you understand this for the rest of your life. If you have, I want you to take out your phones and open up your Bible apps. We're going to look at Matthew chapter 27 tonight. It is not going to be on the screen. This is all you get. I need you to follow along with me in Matthew chapter 27. We're going to be reading and looking at where the story picks up, where Pontius Pilate has turned Jesus over to be crucified. Okay? He's gone through you could call it a trial, but it wasn't really a trial. But at this point, Jesus has been sentenced. He's going to be crucified, and Pilate hands him over so that he can begin the journey to make his way to the cross. And that is what we are going to read. And so I want you, as best as you can, and I'm going to read this not like super slow, but I'm going to read it a little slower than maybe normal, because I want you to envision this. I want you to picture the scene, the atmosphere. Place yourself as a follower in the crowd watching this unfold. Here's what it says, Matthew chapter 27. I'm reading from the NIV, starting in verse 27. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him and took the staff and they struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There, they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. He saved others, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross, and then we'll believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him if he wants him. For he said, "I am the Son of God." In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. Now, this is a difficult text to process. And we don't always talk about what Jesus went through on the cross. Maybe you've seen a movie about this. Maybe you've seen a show that kind of illustrates what this looked like. But what Jesus went through on his way to the cross and on the cross, it's important for us to take note of this. It's important for us to understand this. We often like to talk about Jesus and his love and his grace and his mercy, and those are all wonderful things. But we also can't neglect why those things are available to us, and it's because of this. And so what I want to talk to you about tonight, really quickly, is recognizing we know that Jesus didn't deserve this. He was capable of bringing himself down, but he still suffered so much pain in this moment. So here's some things I want you to know. I'm going to do this quickly. Jesus understands your physical pain. I don't know the type of things that you are dealing with. I can't imagine that many of us in this room are dealing with some type of great physical trauma. I told you about Dawson hit me in the face with a baseball bat. I've also been busted over the face with an elbow and had stitches there. I've torn my ACL and had to recover from that. But in my life, like physically, I haven't really had to go through a whole lot of traumatic things. And I think for all of us, and maybe for the people that you know, most of us don't have to go through or never will go through the things that Jesus went through on the cross. They don't compare to the brutal severity of what happens with crucifixion. I could spend a lot of time talking to you about crucifixion, and I'll do that real briefly. Because we recognize and we know that the Romans crucified thousands of people. They were experts at crucifixion. And so Jesus, before he would ever make it here on his way to the cross, he would be flogged. And what would happen is the Romans believed that a flogging, they would have this flesh-scourging whip that they would take and whip across someone's back, and it would grab their flesh and it would pull it off. And they believed that if you did that 40 times, it would kill a man. And so a flogging was 39 lashes. And Jesus received that before he ever took his crossbeam and began to carry it. In fact, if you were to watch movies or things that depict Jesus, they often show him carrying an entire cross. That's probably not what happened. Jesus probably just carried the cross beam that they would take and probably nailed to an existing tree because wood was expensive in the first century. In fact, oftentimes these crosses where crucifixion would take place were right alongside the road. We read the scripture says, as people walked by, they hurled insults at Jesus. And that's because Jesus, as he carried this cross, it was placed in a place that people could walk by and visibly see him and mock him. Crucifixion was an awful way to die. It would suffocate you. And so after they would place nails in his wrists and inside of his ankles to secure him to this tree and to his crossbeam, every time that Jesus wanted to take a breath, he would have to lift himself up in some way, pulling himself with his hands or lifting himself with his ankles that were nailed into a tree. And so it was excruciating pain just to take a breath to stay alive. Oftentimes, people would be on a cross for days until they ended up dying. And so with all of that to say, Jesus understands your pain. He understands physical pain. And so I tell you that because I don't ever want you for the rest of your life to think that whatever physical thing that you are going through, that God doesn't understand or God doesn't know what it feels like. Jesus knows what physical pain feels like. But more than that, I would need you to know this, is that Jesus understands your emotional pain. Maybe this is where we can identify with things a little bit more, because this morning I preached a message about how Jesus, he knew that Judas would betray him. He knew the disciples would leave him, that Peter would deny him. He knew those things. That was an emotional thing that Jesus probably had to go through as well. But here in this text, we read that Jesus was mocked. He was spit on. He was embarrassed in front of people, all while he was dying in front of them. Like I said, crucifixions took place in areas where people could walk by and physically mock and see this person. I don't know if you've ever felt that way. Or you've been in a place where maybe you've been embarrassed, or you've been feeling like, man, everybody is looking at me because of what I've done. Let me lighten the mood for a minute and let me tell you a story, okay? When I had been on staff here for just a couple months, I was the subject of a very cruel staff prank, okay? I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but the culprit of all of this was the awful Chris Franklin, okay? If you know Chris Franklin, he was the person who set this whole thing up, and I was convinced, I was told we were going to a staff Christmas lunch and everybody dresses up. That's not the case. And I show up this day, and if you know me, I hate dressing up. Like, I can't stand it, okay? And so, but I showed up this day because I was young, I was new on staff, I didn't know any better. I I believed I could trust Chris Franklin, okay? And I show up in slacks, in a dress shirt, in a tie, and guess what? No one else was better dressed than me that day. And the whole staff, I felt like, was looking at me and laughing at me, and I still suffer a little bit of emotional pain from this, okay? It's not something I like to think about, but every Christmas lunch, I'm reminded of this from 8 years ago. Now, that's a silly example, but here's what I want you to think about. Maybe at some point in your life, you're going to deal with some type of emotional pain or something that you deal with because of some way that somebody has treated you or something that you were going through, and you may tend to think and to ask yourself or believe that God doesn't understand what you're going through or God can't feel the things that you are feeling. I don't want you to believe that. If you were to recognize the truth of this text, Jesus, the Son of God, was mocked, spit on, and embarrassed in front of everyone while he was being crucified. He felt that. He felt emotional pain. He gets your pain. He knows what this feels like. Here's the third thing I want you to know, is that Jesus understands your spiritual pain. This is important for us, okay? When he was on the cross, Jesus said this, Matthew chapter 27, verse 46. It says, about 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? You probably heard this before. It's a part of the story. But what Jesus does in this moment is he expresses this spiritual pain that he has, that he feels separation from God. Jesus, fully man, fully divine, God in the flesh, felt separation from God. He experienced spiritual pain in this moment. He felt this separation, but what we realize is that he felt it on our behalf. He didn't have to feel this. He didn't have to go through this. He went through this on our behalf. And so I need you to understand that sometimes in your life that you are going to feel this. You're going to feel separation from God. You're going to feel like you're not very close with God, or that you're going to feel these feelings like, I don't know that God cares about what I'm going through, but that's not true. It couldn't be further from the truth. When you feel like that, when you feel like you aren't close to him, please know that Jesus understands what that feels like too. He understands your spiritual pain. I feel like in my life, I go through seasons where I feel this, where I feel maybe God knows what I go through, or I feel close to him, or I don't feel close to him. And it helps me to know that Jesus, even though he is who he is, felt that same type of separation, that distance from God. Let me end with this. Why does all this matter? Why does it matter that he knows your physical pain, your emotional pain, your spiritual pain? Why does any of this matter? The truth is this, is that Jesus knows your pain, okay? And because of that, you are not alone in your pain. That's the bottom line. That's what I need you to understand. You're going to unpack this more in your groups. He knows your pain, and because of that, you are not alone when you go through physical pain, emotional pain, or spiritual pain. There's power in believing this truth. Let me end with this story. There's a great story in the Old Testament about how God knows our pain, and he doesn't leave us in that pain. It's the story of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Who knows the story? A few of you? Sorry. Let me use their Babylonian names. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now we know the story, okay? The 3 guys that were thrown into a fiery furnace, okay? If you don't know the story, you didn't grow up in church. But let's talk about it for a second, okay? These 3 guys were captured into Babylon. Jewish men captured into Babylon. And when this happened, they were stripped of their identities, stripped of their names, and they tried to make them become Babylonian servants, okay? And in this process, one of the things that happens, they asked them to bow down to a golden image, all right? That was their command. And if you don't do this, then you're going to be thrown into a blazing furnace. And so when this happens, these 3 men, because they were devout followers of God, decided to stand up for their faith and to face the consequences. And so they were thrown into this fiery furnace. And you probably know what happens, but let me read it to you. Daniel chapter 3 says this. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th, he looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace, and he shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the royal advisors crowded around them. They saw the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair on their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants." And this story, I'm not going to break this down completely, but this story reminds us of this great truth that God understands our pain, and he never leaves us alone in it. He was there with these men. He was there. There was another in the fire with them. And this is what I need us to understand. Jesus broke trail for you by experiencing the same type of pain that you can experience in this life. Physical, emotional, spiritual. Jesus has walked through it. And so anything that you go through, he understands you. And what I want you to take away from this is this truth. When we learn to go to God with our pain, when we go to him our pain, we can find ourselves closer to him because he understands what we go through.